Department of Interior, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. The Bureau of Reclamation, also referred to as the Bureau of Wreck the Nation, because actually there's a great book called Cadillac Desert that if you're at all interested in Western water issues, it's a fabulous book. It details the formation of the Bureau of Reclamation and the Army Corps of Engineers, which is kind of like our competitors. So Reclamation was created in 1902. Teddy Roosevelt signed us into law, and we were to make the desert bloom to help develop the western United States. And so we dammed up all of these rivers, and we created all of these irrigation projects in places that you should never try to grow crops, like Carlsbad, New Mexico. It's just not, the soil's not good, you don't get enough rainfall, it's a horrible place to think that you're going to grow. But you had a whole bunch of engineers, and they were just pumped up. We're going to build these dams, we're going to make these levees, we're going to cut these drains, we're going to build these diversion structures to divert water and put it on these fields. Like in the East Coast, they don't divert water, they don't irrigate, they just rely on the rain. It rains, that waters their crops. In the West, it's all about irrigation systems and canals. And one of the things that's interesting too is like, the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, which is all the farms between Cochiti and Elephant Butte. That was originally, I think they were founded in like 1927 or something like that. And the problem with irrigating actually was that a lot of the lands were getting waterlogged because the soil wasn't very good, and they would apply water to the land, and the water table had risen too high, and so they actually couldn't grow crops because it became very alkaline. The salt, low water quality would not be good for growing crops. So actually what they had to do is they had to construct these drainage canals. So they would actually lower the water table, and so you could actually, get better drainage and grow your crops. So that's actually a key component of these irrigation projects. So anyways, throughout the West, there's all kinds of irrigation projects. California, there's the Central Valley Project, there's the Imperial Valley Project. In New Mexico, we've got the Carlsbad Irrigation District, Carlsbad Project, the Middle Rio Grande Project, and the Rio Grande Project. So the Rio Grande Project is Las Cruces farmers. It's basically from Elephant Butte to the state line with Texas, and then into Texas. And then it also includes Mexico. So one of the things that you would learn about if you read this book, Cadillac Desert, is that John Wesley Powell, and I don't know if you guys know him, but he was this incredible explorer, guy, and he went down the Grand Canyon, first person to ever raft the Grand Canyon, went down in a wooden dory, and he had one arm. So he was like rafting down the Grand Canyon. Nobody had ever done that before, and he did it with one arm. So incredible guy. Anyways, he had a vision on how to develop the western United States, and he thought that the states should be created based on basins, river basins. And so they would be these sort of weird shaped things, and it would be all, so it would be a lot easier to manage water resources if there weren't all kinds of interjurisdictional boundaries as we have today. So if you actually look at the map that he created for the western United States, and then you superimpose on it all the horizontal lines that we've created with our current, how states are organized, you can see part of what the problem is, because you've got multiple states, multiple countries, you've got multiple federal agencies, state agencies, you've got local agencies, and all these people have some say over how water gets allocated. It's hard to get people to agree on how to do stuff, right? So I deal a lot now with the Middle Rio Grande and the silvery minnow stuff. I don't know if you guys have heard the silvery minnow. It's an endangered little fish. So the Endangered Species Act actually was passed by Richard Nixon, a great, actually, environmentalist. He signed a lot of good environmental laws into the books. But the Endangered Species Act, the basic idea of the Endangered Species Act is the canary in the coal mine. So I don't know if you're familiar with that metaphor, but like coal miners, they'd have these canaries in there, and when the air quality got real bad, the canary would die, and then the miners would know, we better get the hell out of here because we're going to die too. So the idea is that with various species, that they have properties and things, and there's importance of preserving all the species that we can. We don't want to let species go extinct. And if they're going extinct, then we're going to be next, right? I mean, there's problems. Things are stressed beyond capacity if these species are dying. So in the Middle Rio Grande, we have the silvery minnow, which is a little tiny fish that we spend tens of millions of dollars every year trying to preserve habitat for this fish and to save this fish. I mean, we actually, when the river's drying over here, we actually send people into the river with buckets. So they collect the fish, and then they drive up where the river is still wet, and they dump the fish into the river up there. It's, you know, it's crazy, some of the things that we do. And being a lawyer, you think that lawyers really, you know, are good at arguing, and we argue a lot, and that's definitely true. But if you've ever seen two biologists get into a room and start arguing over science, it's very dangerous. And you know, one of the things that I love about water law and is you're talking about these dynamic natural systems that were created by some higher force, that to think that our laws and our administration and institutions can somehow administer these complex systems that we've come in and screwed up, right? We dammed up these rivers, and you know, flooding is really important to species and to habitat. You know, you've got to have this overbanking of a river to, you know, how the seeds then they, you know, they sprout, and the fish actually do much better in this in the floodplain when the river's overbank and they can hang out in the floodplain, and there's all these little riffles and things. That's where they spawn. And that's where they do really well. But when you dam up these rivers and you channelize them, because it's not just there's flood control, which is to, you know, obviously to protect private property rights, but then there's also, you know, water is about conveyance. It's about using this water. You've got to get it from one point to the next with the least amount of evaporation or losses. So they make, you know, rivers want to be like braided, wide meandering things, and that's not good for conveyance. If you want to conveyance, you want to make a straight line. You want it to be deep, narrow, straight. That's very bad for river habitat. So now we're going in, we do all this like habitat restoration work where we get these big bulldozers, and it's actually like, you know, building, you know, when you were a kid and you used to play in the dirt with water and stuff and watch it flow down, and you'd make these things and whatever. But now you get to do it with big bulldozers, and you know, you rip up the sides of the river, you lower the banks, so when you do get a little extra water in the river, there's like little channels for the fish to go into. So this is something that my agency deals with a lot. But going back a little bit to the silvery minnow, we have the Endangered Species Act requires that if you have a federal agency that's taking an action that could adversely impact a species, then that federal agency needs to consult with the Fish and Wildlife Service. So the Fish and Wildlife Service is also in the Department of Interior, but they are the regulator. And so they've got all the biologists, and they basically, you know, first the federal agency takes a self-assessment of what they're doing in a biological assessment, and then they give this to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Fish and Wildlife Service then issues a biological opinion that basically says, well, yeah, you're going to jeopardize, and that's a term of art, this fish. So you need to do all these take all these mitigative measures to do that. Like what I was just saying, this habitat restoration, you got to lower the banks. You've got to try to mimic the natural hydrograph as if the reservoirs weren't there. Because one of the things that's interesting about these species, the minnow knows to spawn based on the spring runoff. So the snow melts, the water comes down in a big pulse, and somehow that's a biological trigger for these fish that they know that they need to lay their eggs. So when you don't have that big spring flow, then they don't spawn, and they're all confused. So what we try to do is we try to mimic that natural hydrograph. But the problem is if you just do it for a short period of time and you get some of that overbanking, and then the fish go into the floodplain and they're having their good time over there, but then there's not enough water to keep that flow, then they get stranded and die. So it's just so complicated. These, like I said, these systems are very complicated. We've screwed them up, and now we're trying to, you know, make it right to some degree. And then there's not agreement about this, because the farmers want their water for irrigation, the cities want their water for municipal and industrial uses. You know, so there's a lot of competition. Plus, the state of New Mexico is freaked out because we've lost so many times to Texas. We've got to get our water to Texas, and they're like, yeah, very reactive. If there's anything that we're doing that could, you know, impact their ability to get water downstream to Texas, they have a fit. And they actually have sued the Bureau of Reclamation in the Lower Rio Grande over over this issue, and there's actually a big lawsuit going on. But one of the main things I wanted, and I'll stop in a second and let you guys ask questions. But one of the main things that, the way I see things, and actually I was down at a conference in Las Cruces a couple of weeks ago, and Senator Udall was there, and he actually gave a great talk, and he showed the same, pictures of how John Wesley Powell would have organized the states and stuff. And he talked about the difficulty of trying to administer water with all these interjurisdictional problems and getting people to get along. And then when you think about that in relation to the fact that we're suffering extended drought, and we're looking down the barrel of climate change, we need to get together and we need to work together to figure this stuff out. And there's no one organization that can do it. It requires everybody coming together and working collaboratively and doing what they can to try to improve the habitat and to try to engage in the best management practices for water operations. So that's what I try to work on.